that's one of the things that we've been working on, is what do you do with these people who, I feel like I've recovered from this horrible situation, but
what do
they
you
go
do
back
with
to
a
it.
child who is being abused within their home and they're pulled out by CPS? Don't you do the same thing?
Yeah, and we work with
trafficked kids
CPS.
that you do with CPS?
Yeah.
I'm just shocked that you said that 50 times they've been out in the streets of the system. Somewhere in the system, there's a major breakdown, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Would you say some of these kids end up feeling more comfortable with the trafficker than with the
They're in love
foster?
with their trafficker.
Yeah.
The trafficker gives them drugs, and the trafficker gives them alcohol, and the trafficker lets them do whatever they want on the weekends, and there's no rules. So yeah, they're running away from something as much as they're running to something. So a lot of these kids, when I recover them, are not happy to be recovered. I'm no hero to a lot of these kids.
Like, how many are we talking about in your area?
I could probably get in my car right now and drive around and fill her up. I know all the places to go, and I could fill it up with people who are being trafficked. And then the question becomes, what do you do with them? That's the problem, is what do you do with these kids and these adults who you recover?
Has there been like a spike, if you look historically, a certain period of time where it really spiked in kids being human trafficked?
No, I think we're becoming more aware of it. And I think certainly there's spikes like on home football game weekends where they're being trafficked more, or times when there's more people in town just because of a supply and demand, but
No, just the same over time, the last 50 years. It's been
the last 15 that I've been doing it, we're certainly getting better at it and we're recovering more, but what we're working on now is trying to change sort of the overall system, the bigger system, so that you're not recovering the same kid 50 times.
So you keep saying about being trafficked, but like, what's the scenario? What does it look like? So I'm an unhappy kid and I'm walking around a football game and somebody approaches me and says, here you want, like, how
It's
does
not
that
a
work?
stranger.
Yeah, so
It's your uncle. It's your dad. It is your cousin. It's somebody who you've been doing drugs with for the last couple of years. It's your friend from the neighborhood. It's somebody who knows you and who knows your weaknesses, and someone who, the traffickers are very, very good at what they do. They're predators, and they can sense weakness in people. And so what they do is, scoop up the people in their neighborhood who they know are vulnerable, who they know they can make money off of. So it's not, someone who's going off to school and, is going to meet some stranger, because they have a safe and secure environment. Just by virtue of you guys being here, your kids or your grandkids or whatever are probably a lot less likely, not probably, they are, a lot less likely to become involved, because it's not a stranger danger. It's somebody in their circle. It's somebody they know.
Are they housed by them at all? Or do they still go back every night to these abusive parents?
Sometimes they go back during the week, and they work only on weekends. Sometimes they're gone for a couple weeks at a time and come back. Sometimes they're gone. We had one years ago where we recovered a girl. She was 15 years old and this pregnant, and I had to bring her back to her mom at 3 o'clock in the morning on a random Tuesday night. She hadn't been home in a year and a half. And I rang the doorbell. This is going to be an awkward conversation. So we ring the doorbell, bang on the door, ring the doorbell, like 3 o'clock in the morning. They finally answered the door. The mother finally answers the door, and she said, God, pulled her daughter in, shut the door. Didn't even want to know who I was or why I was there or what was going on. No interest.
Do you have any success stories, like how? I mean, this is an important question. How have people that do get out of it? How do they get out of it?
Every now and again, we get one that finally it clicks, and usually it's when they're a little bit older. When they're young, it just isn't making sense. Teenage kids, I have 2 of them. Like, things just don't make sense in their head, or they think that that's the more fun and more exciting or just better option. When they get a little bit older, sometimes they'll finally say, I gotta, they see the writing on the wall, like, this is not a good career choice. Once you get involved in human trafficking as a prostitute, you have about a 7-year lifespan in the system before you OD or get killed or whatever. So sometimes when they get a little bit older, they'll be like, this is not the life for me. and then they can get a little bit more services. You know, there's services available, but you have to kind of want it. It's like alcoholism. You can't make somebody else change.
Right.
They need to want to change.
Yeah.
And that's super hard with people who are addicted to drugs or addicted to alcohol or addicted to just doing what they want to do. But there are success stories.
How many of these kids might end up then becoming the predator later in life?
Sometimes they do. You know, there's a structure that happens, and there's a pimp, who's generally a man, who has his horde of women. And one of those women is in charge. So sometimes the person who's preyed on finally like grows up enough and they get to be the lady in charge of all these other folks. It's not very often that that person becomes a pimp, but on occasion we'll get one. But for a lot of times there's such a victim mentality, and they've been beaten down physically, emotionally through abuse, alcohol abuse and drug abuse, that they don't really have it in their head to be able to be in charge.
So like thinking upstream, right, prevention, right?
Uh-huh.
We want to stop this from happening. That seems like that should be the focus.
Mm-hmm.
So you said that these kids emerge from homes where parents don't care. So I guess what I'm thinking is that would be the place to start. And what are some of the characteristics that you see of households that produce these children? Like, what are some of the characteristics of those?
Absent parents, drug addiction.
What does that mean, absent parent?
The dad's dead or incarcerated. The mother's dead or incarcerated.
So who's the adult living in the home?
Sometimes it's a brother, sometimes it's an uncle, sometimes it's a grandma. Trauma. They all have significant trauma history.
So when you say that, like, can you describe what you mean?
One of the gals that I was working with, she's 14 years old. Her mother had just had enough of her meds one day, poured gasoline on her head and caught herself on fire in the kitchen in front of her children and died. So these kids are living with that vision of their mother. Like, she'd rather burn to death in the kitchen than raise her own kids. And that kind of trauma just, it changes you forever.
So how do you get at that root cause then of parents that don't care?
I don't know. What we do from our perspective is we work a lot with CPS and we work a lot with runaways. We get a list of runaway kids. And we'll just go out sometimes and just try to find those kids and figure out what they're up to and what they're doing. And a lot of them are involved in trafficking, chronically missing kids. Oh, yep.
You see these things put out on Facebook and stuff where they say, you know, people were circling the targets and looking at kids and trying to, is that really happening?
Raises my blood pressure. No. No, not at all. Nobody's going to put a shirt under your windshield wiper in the hopes that you'll get out and move the shirt. Like, if they wanted you out of your car, they just get you when you're walking up to your car. There's no point in putting stuff under your windshield wiper. It makes me crazy. And nobody is driving around Walmart looking for a kid who happens to be, you know, away from his mom or whatever, because those kids want to come home. They make terrible victims because they have families that they want to go back to. If you're a predator, you want somebody where you're the better deal. So it's these people who are known to the family, or they know what your weaknesses are, and then they give you a better deal. We had a gal, or two of them, 15 and 16 years old. They were willing to work as prostitutes for a Subway sandwich because that way they could eat. And that was what they were working for. Their predator would give them a Subway sandwich every day. Because that was a better deal.
Teaching that information, and why is that this false stuff being put out there? Because I've seen the same things that she's talking about, and I was saying I was worried about my daughter, but now I have a completely different understanding.
Yeah.
Why aren't people, you know, kind of teaching, marketing that to? So
Well, if you go to Missing in Michigan, it's a website that's run by a friend of mine, Sarah Krebs, who's a Michigan State police officer. And about every quarter, she puts out a really long write-up about how those things are not accurate, but it's hard to control. It's fake news, you know?
Right,
It just
but
gets
I mean,
out
but
there, it gets
reaching
shared.
people or even reaching other kids, because it seems like we live in fear of our kids being stolen from the Walmart parking lot or from the mall or something like that. But going at it, like doing Instagram, doing Snapchat, doing the things that the kids read, they also don't live in fear, and they can look at their friends too and see what's their friend's home life, and so almost you have a peer-to-peer helping. And I never hear.
Which gets into a whole different kind of predator thing, which isn't necessarily human trafficking, but you know, the Snapchat and the this and the that, where you get online and make a friend who you think is 14 and you start sharing naughty pictures with each other, and then you find out the guy's not 14, he's 50 and living in his mom's basement.
But I'm
And
saying
that is
adding, doing like PSA kind of announcements and stuff like on Instagram, things that catch kids' attentions to say, you know, this is what you're looking for, you know, watch out for that guy, or watch out for your uncle who's asking you strange questions, or to do different things, or something like that.
They have stuff like that. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children does all kinds of stuff like that. They have a website, Team
Teenagers gonna
Home.
go look at on that. I mean, it needs
They partner with
some-
Instagram and Snapchat and those different kinds of things. It's just, it's hard to get out there. Yep.
So in Ann Arbor, we have the Delana Center, which is the homeless. Are
They're
there
great.
places like that specifically for kids?
There is one in Detroit that we use called Vista Marie, and they are wonderful and always fully booked. There's another one out in Kalamazoo, and it runs into just some weird governmental limitations. Like, we recovered a gal, and we need to find somewhere for her to go. CPS has determined that she can't go back to her parents, which is a good thing. But now we need to figure out what to do with her. So we have this girl. She needs to go into a shelter. We find a shelter in Kalamazoo. Here's where the government comes in. I can't drive a minor in my car. Against the law, I can't do it unless I have CPS with me. CPS can't leave the county because there's CPS in this county. The sheriff's office that we're working with can't drive someone to a different county because then they're not insured in their car once they cross the state line or the county line. So it comes into this whole governmental paperwork thing where it's very difficult. And we don't just leave them and, you know, rules may have been bent. But, you know, there's all kinds of just regulations and things that make it very difficult. But there are places where these kids can go. We need more. We need more for sure.
So you're here to impart info for us, and also I assume to give us some action plans. So tell us, you know, besides the bad things, tell us what we can do to support you, to support the kids.
Support Ozone House. Ozone House is another one for runaway kids. They won't take people who are currently drug addicted or they need to have their parents' permission to go there, but a place like Ozone House, which is like the Delana Center for Kids, they need all kinds of things. They need clothing, they need backpacks. You know, these kids that we're recovering have a bag full of stripper clothes. That's not gonna help them in the real world. They don't have normal clothing, they don't have toiletries, you know, that kind of thing. If you guys wanted to get together and do a clothing drive, or the socks are great, like these kids don't have
And are you leaving us a
needs.
list of these resources that we can, I mean, besides just, like I said, besides the bad stuff, are you leaving us a resource list of like, here's how we can help?
I can make one.
That would be great.
Yeah. No, I'm always here to soak up resources.
Can you arrest?
How many can I arrest?
I mean, can you arrest?
Oh, yeah.
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 So can you
It's-
go after those?
Oh yeah, that's the whole, the reason why the FBI gets involved is because what we try to do is take down the structure. You take the person who's actually making all that money, who's driving the Escalade on the backs of all these other girls who are working for him. So that's what we try to do.
Successfully?
We try. It takes sometimes, you know, a couple of cracks at some of these girls before they're in a comfortable and safe place. Like I said, a lot of them don't want to get recovered by me. I'm not the person they want to see at, you know, midnight or whatever. So we have to it takes years sometimes to get the victims to a stable place where they're comfortable talking, where they can testify against that pimp. So it's a long game. It's not a quick one.
Question? So you mentioned something very, very proactive about like trying to enable facilities like Ozone House to actually better care for children who find themselves in this trap. Is there also sort of specific organizations that you're aware of that do advocacy? Because it seems like, you know, there are various governmental barriers and so forth that are also sort of part of the problem, if you will. And so are there specific organizations that you're aware of that actually sort of participate in sort of those higher order?
I was just at the National Center for the Missing and Exploited Children last week, and they've got some really great programs where they try to see sort of the bigger picture and from a different angle than I do. You know, I sometimes get sort of hyper-focused on trying to arrest that person without thinking of all of the layers of aftercare for some of the other people, and that's something that the National Center really does a good job with, is trying to provide this level of care. Because once you recover somebody, if you do find one that's sort of making it click, I've got one that I've talked to for just years. You know, once you you make that connection, you know, it's sort of a commitment. It's not the normal kind of FBI case where you close your case and then you're done with it. I still talk to a lot of those victims.
So for example, you know, you talked about sort of the role of the functional or dysfunctional family unit, if you will. And so, you know, again, at a very high order, if in fact many of these kids are coming out of less than desirable functioning families, you know, I mean, that's a pretty broad problem. But, you know, yet there are specific mechanisms that are, you know, in place that actually allow us as a society and community members.
And they're not super desirable to foster care. Nobody wants to foster a kid who's a chronic runaway, who's drug addicted.
Right.
You know, so they're looking for places like the Ozone House, people that have very specific skill set that they're able to help these kids sort of adjust.
Like the situation of trying to drive somebody across county lines and getting somebody there, is there like a nonprofit like person, I mean, that could just do that, be the driver for you?
You can, but then you're also ceding custody of a minor to a nonprofit. And that gets into, you know, what if they get in a car accident? Now they're in the care and custody of someone who does not have, you know, guardianship over that child.
Can you take them to the border and have somebody meet you?
We've done that, yeah. Michigan State Police sometimes, if you can get somebody who's not real busy, yeah.
This conversation is interesting because we're kind of going in between the immediate needs, the downstream caring for the children or the adults that are caught into this, which is really important. But again, I keep thinking systematically, where is it originating, where is it starting, and how can we provide resources to stop, to nip it in the bud way upstream before kids get sucked into the
Yeah, a lot of times it's generational too. It's kind of their family
right,
business.
so where and how can we best intervene upstream to prevent it from happening?
But in large part, that's exactly why I raised the issue about, you know, general family support, social services, you know, for people, everything from, you know, providing after school care, you know, to, you know, help,
Counselors
you know,
in the elementary schools.
yeah.
A washer and dryer in the
high
high school. Like, these kids don't have clean clothes.
Yeah.
It would be delightful if they had a washer and dryer and like a little closet with food and clothes in every high school.
In the
So-
home ec program. That was
Yeah.
just on the news this morning, that they have provided that in certain schools.
Not all of them.
Yeah.
Not the, yeah. And the thing is, the more wealthy schools are the ones more likely to be able to have those resources. And it's the other schools that really, really need it. But that would be wonderful.
Schools are not in the business of providing those kinds of services. Schools are in the business of providing an education. Washing and drying clothes happens in a healthy, functional family, right? And that's why I keep going back to, it's the healthy, functional family that we need to be focusing on, not enabling those parents to continue to not provide laundry service out of their own, right, by giving it to the schools. Schools are designed to provide an education. We can't make schools the be-all and end-all of all basic human needs.
Right.
We just can't. We cannot afford it as a society either.
Well, we also can't afford to have all these kids.
Right.
That's
I mean,
why it
it's like a
starts in the
circular
home.
thing. Yeah.
That's why it starts in the home with parents who can provide those kinds of things.
But you can't take these kids from their parents most of the time.
Right.
There's no way that the CPS system can take all the kids from these parents.
Right.
Because they keep getting sent back. They say, oh, well, they're okay, we're sending them back. Oh, well, they're okay, then we're sending them back. So
That's
why
not
can't
what I
we
heard.
provide some of this stuff in the schools or in other places so these kids don't look like they're somebody that can go after them?
Then those parents will never ever be held accountable for being the parents that they need to be if you're always enabling the parents. They never can become self-sufficient parents.
But we don't live in utopia.
I know.
Yeah. No, we never have lived in
And
utopia.
we can't legislate it, this is part of family life, okay? And there are many people out there that look perfectly normal on the outside.
Right.
And you would never guess that they are as dysfunctional as they are, and that things are as rotten in their household as they are.
Yeah.
And they're there,
Yeah.
and there's nothing you can do at that level to do that. There are other resources. I have friends that live in North Carolina who belong to a mega church, and their mega church has actually put in washers and dryers and little changing rooms and they have small little snack bars and groceries. They even set up a grocery store in a bad neighborhood, okay? And there's no way that we can stop it at that level.
Susan, did you have more that you wanted to share with us?
Yeah.
No, I like this better.
All right.
We talk about all kinds of statistics and boring stuff. This is way
when
better.
things in biblical times.
Exactly. I was thinking the same, this is in the Bible. The son, you know, like you're gonna be punished, the sons of the sons and the, and basically what it is, excuse me, but shit rolls downhill. And this has been, in many of these families, this has been happening. And you think you're gonna fix one, it ain't that easy, unfortunately.
No, it's not.
Would you say that for many of these kids that school can be the safest part of their day?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. It's the only place they're getting a meal sometimes. It's the only place where they can they're not being literally assaulted by things going on around them. So even though they're usually chronically under performers in school, it's a place where they can sort of decompress. And as soon as they get out of school and head towards home or their predator, because they don't know who's going to be there. Might be one, might be the other at home, or their parent. So yeah, school is a lot of times their safe place.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to gather my thoughts. We need to, as Christians going out into a community that has problems, you know, I think that we are presented sometimes with individuals, and we are supposed to, I believe, love that person that's in front of us. So it begins at a real individual level for these kids, young women. So if we are bringing Christ, I know this sounds too simple, but it's not all that simple. If we're to bring Christ's love to the community, to that person that's standing in front of us, sometimes those are the people who are, it might be that one young woman who needs some kind of validation in her life that she won't go to her pimp. I mean, are we not individually responsible for treating other individuals with respect that they're not getting? Would that work at all?
It does, but you gotta kind of keep pecking at it. You gotta have a thick skin with it.
We're not gonna be we're not gonna end this problem, but we could help on the individual level.
Sure.
Are there individuals that are reaching out to the school so that they can partnership and kind of talk with them and see what they can do at their end?
Yeah, there's a program called SOAP, Save Our Adolescents from Prostitution, and they do a lot of outreach with schools and at hotels where they're working.
Okay. Another question. You know, when I think of trafficking, I think of somebody that comes and whistle away my kid and throw him in a truck and drive him off someplace and to a foreign country or whatever. But what I hear you talking about is really trafficking within the community. They're here, they're in front of us, and they go home at night and go out. Is there both of those happening?
They do definitely cross state lines sometimes, and if you find someone who's a good worker, they'll take them to Atlanta or to Chicago because it's a better market. But I would say the vast majority of what we see is someone who's doing it on the weekends or with their boyfriend. When we recover the kids, like I said, they're not happy to see me. They want to get back with their trafficker because that's who they're in love with and that's who they're trauma bonded to.
Are these kids talking with counselors in school about these things, or?
Counseling is offered. I wouldn't say they're super receptive the first 5 or 10 times you run into them. So it takes a good bit of just sticking with it and offering those services every single
Are the
time.
counselors at the schools being taught to do this? I mean, the counselors my kids had in high school were worthless. I'm sorry, they were.
It's hit or miss. It depends who you've got. I've worked with CPS a little bit on this, and I've worked with some counselors at different schools on this. So
one thing that I do, I'm retired now. I retired in June, so I have a whole lot more time, but I volunteer with Ann Arbor Public Schools, and twice a week I see a little boy, the same boy, who's struggling and has a rough family life, and that we know, evidence shows that one supportive adult in a child's life can make the difference in a person going down one road or another road. And
That's
so
what I was trying to
that
say.
is so and I have no children, and I go and sit with this boy, I help him with his school project for half an hour, but the rest of the time I'm being that one supportive adult that he has. It has made all the difference in that little boy's life. I'm shocked by it because I thought, I'm not making any difference in this little boy's life, but the teacher says, oh my gosh, this little boy is turning completely around. So that's something all of us can do. We don't have to rely on a counselor to do that, right? We all can do
Yeah,
that.
that's exactly what I was trying to say.
What she said.
Yeah, what she said.
So the other question is, who's paying for these kids' services that's keeping this business going? And why are
Oh,
we
the
not-
customers. I thought you meant the taxpayers.
The customers of, you know, so you've mentioned the kids that are selling M&Ms, and we know they're doing a lot more than selling M&Ms. So who are these people that are paying these kids to get the money going up the chain, and why are we not, or can we, or what are we doing to help with that
I
situation?
work with the Human Trafficking Clinic at the University of Michigan, and one of the director's favorite quotes is, they've made it illegal to sell sex, but not illegal to buy sex. Because it's not as popular to go after the Johns as it is to go after the prostitutes. And what we're doing now is slowly turning the boat around on that, where I'm not going to arrest a prostitute for doing what she does because she started when she was a child. She's, you know, called survival sex. You know, they're doing what they can to get by. Is it against the law? Yes, but what they're doing in the bigger picture, they're not the problem. The problem is the person taking the money and the person providing the money. They're just the conduit between it all. So we're starting to do that a lot better, particularly in this county, at looking at the customer.
Are you making arrests the customer? I mean, is it?
We're not doing as good as we should. It's difficult to arrest the customer because if you think of just how to set up an investigation, I need to have a cooperative prostitute, and they're difficult to find. It's easier to sort of work your way upstream and try to find that pimp.
And then they all yell entrapment. If you
Yeah.
try to set it up the way that you want to, they all yell entrapment.
The Johns do.
Yeah.
The parents should be arrested for neglect. Arrested. Yeah.
Would you
It's
still
a
leave a
crime.
child?
It's a crime. Is neglect
Considered a crime? I don't know.
Child endangerment, yeah.
So I have a question. I'm completely naive about all this stuff.
Yeah.
I have no idea because I'm just, you know, I live here in Ann Arbor. I'm just isolated. I'm not being cynical about this. How big of a problem is this? Are we talking like 14 kids? Are we talking 100 kids? I mean, here in Washtenaw County, how big of a problem is this?
Oh, hundreds for sure.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
hundreds of
Children.
a year, a day, a month? I mean, what's the
Yeah,
scope and the magnitude?
I couldn't tell you for sure, and it depends also how you describe it. Are we talking child prostitution? Are we also talking the people that are getting online, who are sending pictures that they shouldn't to an adult who's 50 years old? There are kids in the more wealthy neighborhoods who are doing prostitution on the weekends as sugar babies, because that's a fun way to make $1,000 in a weekend. And if you're going to be doing that stuff anyway, why not get paid? So, you know, there's different gradations sort of what's going on, and the full number I couldn't tell you, but it's definitely happening. I have arrested kids in just about every hotel in Ann Arbor. Maybe a couple down by the mall that I haven't gotten to yet, but certainly all of the big hotels around here. So it's happening everywhere.
Did the hotels call and report? Or how
On
do you find them?
occasion, usually it's us working an operation where we know that something is going on because it's a busy weekend or whatever. We look at online traffic sometimes. It used to be
heard
easier when
that-
Backpage was around.
That hotel that's by the expressway out near
Victory Inn.
Land, it's just rampant.
Mhm.
Which one?
Oh, that
Victory Inn.
23 in Washington.
Right across Marble
Yeah.
Right next to the marijuana
Yeah, it's
dispensary,
great.
across from DSW.
And
there's
kids going in and out?
Oh, yeah, they were renting rooms all the
The
time.
kids go in and they'll generally get the room or have an older person pay for the room, but they've got, you know, kids, they're usually teenagers, 15 to 17.
Was there kickback to the workers at the desk?
Sometimes. Sometimes
Was anything done to those people?
you
Or
gotta
to
prove
the-
it. Knowing it and proving it are two different things. Yeah.
So how young is too young? I mean, you hear about people cruising around the bus stop or something looking to pick up kids. Is that just for like that's not to get them into trafficking? And
Well, and that is, that's
I mean, if they're too young, it's just for
There's no bottom
A one-time
to this.
thing and-
There's no too young.
okay.
We've had
So-
kids as young as 6 years old being sold.
So that's what I'm wondering. You
Yeah.
have to worry about the.
And then the
people
bus
that are
stop, although
cruising.
that's not the familiar relationship that I was talking about before, it's predators who know their prey and they know that these runaway kids at a bus stop are lost. And I think it was 70% of runaway kids are approached by a trafficker within 48 hours
Well,
of
I mean,
leaving.
just a story like your mom sent me to pick you up or something like that.
Not something like
something-
that. It's going to be something a little more, you know, hey, do you want to come party with me for the weekend? Like, it's a little bit more direct.
For a little kid, don't say that, you mean?
Well, for a 5, 6, 7, maybe up to 10 years old, they're probably not going to be alone at a bus stop.
Right.
Hopefully, yeah.
That's going to be, you know, the teenage kid who's mad at their mom and took a bus somewhere. The little ones are generally somebody in their family or
So
somebody
as
in their
young as
neighborhood.
6, though.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm glad to, for the reassurance that it's unlikely that my children would just be stolen into a van. But I do wonder what your recommendations are in terms of just keeping them safe. For example, letting my 5 to 11-year-old play at the park by themselves. Would you say, with your experience, just don't let them do that? Or, letting when my daughter was in middle school, letting her walk to middle school by herself, would you recommend that she's always with a buddy?
I think always with a friend is helpful just for general safety.
Right.
If somebody gets hit by a car or you, I don't know, fall into the shrubs or whatever. But, I let my kids walk around. They go to the park by themselves, and they're older now, but, when they were. I would say the more concerning thing, or the thing that I would be more anxious about, is just the online stuff.
Right.
Yeah. Making friends online, but keeping a phone away from a kid is not the answer, because then they just find a friend's phone and then you've lost all control over their access to the internet. So,
So can you summarize for us, and we've heard certain things like working individually with a child one-on-one, maybe trying to do something through the schools, ozone house, but can you sort of list for us things that you see that would be very helpful to have us do, besides hugging our kids and our grandkids?
yeah, I mean, like you were saying, it's more of a systemic thing. If I were the lord of everything, I would double the funding that goes to CPS so that they could address the neglectful parents in a more meaningful way, instead of being overwhelmed by their caseloads and not being able to really identify and handle some of these problems. But that's probably a bigger issue that we can.
But I mean,
tackle
besides
just
not
us.
buying the M&Ms, is there anything we can do when we see it happen?
Like to report it.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, just.
If you see anything suspicious, call 911. We will often find when we go back in time, like the M&Ms thing. Somebody finally called me about the M&M issue when there was a 5-year-old selling M&Ms at B-Dubs. So they call me, we get the report, he's selling the M&Ms at B-Dubs. Then we go back and look at all these older reports, and you see an entire generation of kids where the 17-year-old that was watching this kid sell was the child 10 years ago in police reports with someone else having him sell M&Ms. Now you've got this whole history based solely on other people who called 911 to make a report that might not make sense at the time, but eventually can help us stitch together a case. So if you see anything, call 911.
We missed that. The M&M.
Yeah. You're the M&M. No. The difference between labor trafficking and sex trafficking. So labor trafficking, there's a thing going on where people are coming out. I've seen only from Detroit where they have a group of people that come out and they sell the M&Ms, $5 for M&Ms. I'm too cheap for that.
I've seen them at Westgate.
And
Yes.
Arborland and the restaurants up and down Main and State, but they're not selling money for a YMCA camp, and they're not selling money for some kind of sport camp.
What
They're
are they saying that they're selling them for?
YMCA camp and sports camp.
Oh.
And what they're really doing is just kicking all the money to the person who drove them out from wherever
So
they're
what
from.
should we do in that case? We see somebody,
Call 911.
Call 911.
Because you're supposed to have a permit. I'm gonna break your TV. You're supposed to have a permit when you do that kind of stuff, and they don't have the permits, and they're not selling for any good purpose. And those kids sometimes are working 12 or 14 hours a day with no food, no compensation, no parental intervention.
Is there something specific that Zion could do as a group, as a larger group, say in a school or something very direct, that would either provide resources or provide time to something very specific?
Well, before you run away, how did you get hooked up with that pairing with the boy that you're working with?
Yeah, there's an organization in Washtenaw County called RSVP, and it's for people over age 50 who want to volunteer in different ways in the county. And you just let them know what kind of volunteering you're interested in. And I told them I was interested in working with kids in a school setting. And then they paired me up with this little boy and said he's a struggling student. He needs a caring person in his life, you know, and needs help with school. And
RSVP's been around a long
they're
time.
awesome.
They've been around a long time for those
Big
of us
brothers and big
who have
sisters,
grown
there's a
up
lot
here
of
in
that same
Ann
kind of
Arbor.
thing. Yeah.
Usually for the Ann Arbor Public
Yeah,
Schools.
it's an awesome organization.
I just Googled it and is it RSVP something else?
Probably
Because,
Washtenaw County.
okay.
Or Ann Arbor
Okay.
Public Schools too.
I'll ask a different question, but the same one. I'm not 50.
It doesn't matter. Good for you. You're good. Yeah.
So, what I've generally seen, because this all sounds very overwhelming. I have two small children that are 4 and 2, right? And I know that a lot of the people in our Sunday school class are here that have young children. And so, you know, a lot of times say, oh, there's this big bad problem. Okay, oh, there's 1,700 ways. Like, I know we're not going to fix X or fix Y, you know, that sort of thing. You know, click of a finger. Is there a project like providing clothes for Ozone, or that are specific things that maybe Sunday school classes or could get behind and all come together to do, especially as we come up to Christmas? Or are there specific things like that we could either contribute money or contribute time, or like buy things like clothes, socks, that we could do to help you?
One of the things, I keep going back to Ozone House because they just sold their property in Ann Arbor and they doubled their size, and now they have this huge new facility in Ipsy, which they're trying to get furnished and they're trying to get sort of up and running, and they have these kids coming in and the kids have nothing. So I would say reach out to Ozone and see, you know, what's their wish list and how does that fit with sort of the time and the money that you guys are willing to put into the problem, and see. I am gonna break that TV.
So one of the things, you know, again, we could do that, and again, I'm not trying to deflect upon a professional, but, you know, we could formulate a committee and try to pull together, you know, a set of ideas, and then try to vet them and make decisions about, you know, what is Zion's response to, you know, this particular plight, and maybe indeed it's an involvement in Ozone House or RSVP or something like that. But again, you know, it's really on us, you know, to actually vet some of those ideas and actually pull them together. And it doesn't have to be one; it could be, you know, as many as we have resources to actually pull off. Because there are probably 10,000, you know, places.
Well, our CPS might have some good ideas too, as far as what their holes are that we could fix.
Foster homes, there's a huge shortage of foster homes.
Oh, foster homes. Yeah, if you guys could foster angry teenagers, that would be.
We did that already once.
But they do need that. Like that's
That's the hard years.
Yeah.
That's the hard years. What is the pie chart? One of the things I wanted to walk away from this meeting today was to understand what is human trafficking in Washtenaw County and what does it look like? Is it children? Is it adults? Is it labor? Is it sex? And it's real. What does the face look like? And I know there's not one face, but what does your pie chart tell us?
Those are national statistics, but I can tell you from working in Washtenaw County, We see more sex trafficking in Washtenaw. I work 5 counties, so I gotta kind of think of my counties here. Washtenaw isn't as rural, so we don't see a lot of the labor trafficking with the farm workers. We did have some issues with labor trafficking with foreign nationals coming in and being forced to do work, but I would say it's sex trafficking, and even the adults. I don't even like to parse it between the kids and the adults, because the adults all started when they were kids.
Okay.
So I would say it's sex trafficking born of generations of trauma and lack of support and lack of a solid family structure where they have, a place where they can be safe.
Thank you. On Wednesday, we have God and Grub, which is for homeless people at the Ronas, and they get a bus and bring them to church. And I was noticing that there were quite a few here last Wednesday, and a number of them were asking the pastors for sweaters. I mean, so I don't know. I mean, they hear it's Zion, it's cold. It's like, do you guys have any? And the pastor went down in the basement, and she didn't have enough of that kind of thing. So we might want to just, if you have some extra sweaters at home, you might want to bring them over here for Wednesday.
Yeah, we've recovered victims. We take everybody out of the hotel room, we interview everybody. Hours and hours later, we go back to the hotel room, and we have the victims pack their bags, because they're going to go off to a new place in their life. But it's a bag full of stripper clothes. It's not stuff that's useful in the real world, like a hoodie.
When you do that, how often do you see them bounce back, or do they pop up in another area?
90% of the time, I'll see them again. There are some that I know. Me again.
Because it almost sounds like, yes, it's great to have things to be able to donate, but it really sounds like it's a connection that they need that support.
And the commitment to have your heart broken a lot.
Right.
To offer the services and get denied, and offer the services and get denied until, eventually you know that a lot of them aren't going to be successful. But eventually you'll get one that sticks, and you kind of hang your hopes on that one and keep knocking at that door.
Bob, it might be something where, like, every Sunday for a while, there's, this is the face of, and have a story, because I'm sure we've all probably done it, bought something, or, not realizing that that's what we were supporting.
Yeah, I think just, if you have a chance to come on Wednesday, it's from the members of Zion, and, it's a really neat service. And if you just talk to them, one thing I've noticed too in that group, there's a high percentage that have mental illness issues. So, I have a mentally ill brother, so I just had that kind of experience. But, it's I think if you they really appreciate just someone to talk to. Really.
Oh, absolutely. When we do the overnights, that's what they're...
That's just like the volunteering, right? You don't have to be 50 years old to work with Ann Arbor Public Schools. You can be much younger, much older, right? Just being that supportive person in that child's life could keep them from going down the trafficking road.
Right, well, the homeless thing is great, but there's a solid process in place where there isn't, with the...
All right, we're going to have to stop. Thank you very much. There's a great interest and a great concern, and I can promise you this, that the Adult Education Committee, we're meeting, and we will schedule another class on this to talk about what we can do. All right, and I would invite you all, when you see that on the schedule, to come, because obviously there's a lot of interest in this.
Maybe make it when there's not another class also that you have.
I can't guarantee that. Choices are wonderful, that's all I can say. The final thing I want to say is that we do have a suitcase here full of socks that we are going to give to Special Agent Susan Lucas to take with her to do with what she wants, what she thinks is best. And again, I want to thank you very much.
Can we start another one?
Yeah. Thank you very much.